and welcome to D.O.P.E Conversations. I am so excited, and I know I say that every week, but this week I am truly excited because I did something that was a little bit out on faith, and today I have Dr. Melina Abdullah here, and I'm so excited that I almost can't speak. So I wanted to share her knowledge that I got to take part in today. And she's our resident activist at PVAMU, and she's spoken to us before, and it was amazing, inspiring and encouraging. So I wanted to ask her today to be on the show to hopefully inspire and encourage you. So thank you, Dr. Abdullah, for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm almost like starstruck, and that's why I'm trying to control my words, because you are like my present day W.E.B. Du Bois. My guests and people always know that I love W.E.B. Du Bois, and when I hear you and I hear your words, they're always so encouraging but thought-provoking and make me think and stretch myself. So thank you for that.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you for that honor, for thinking of me even in the same sentence.
Yes.
Thank you. Sentence.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And then we also have Dr. Melanie Price, who is our director of our Racial for Justice Center here at PVAMU, which is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
That we even have that opportunity to have that. So we're going to talk to you more about that. And then we also have Dr. Bach, and I'm so glad to have you here as well. So ladies, we are going to share and hopefully give our audience something to think about. And the first thing I really wanted to talk about today was the thing that you always say, for whose I am. Can you explain to our guests and our audience what that means?
Sure. So what I had the opportunity to talk with the students and also faculty about is how important it is to know not just who you are, but whose you are. And that's not my saying. My grandmother used to say that. But I think it's a really profound thought, right? Who are you, but whose are you, right? Because we live in a world that tries to get us to think that we belong to systems and institutions that don't serve us.
Right.
Whose we are is we are our peoples. We belong to our people. We belong to our ancestors. We belong to our Creator. We belong to the purpose that we were divinely ordained to serve. And so always thinking about whose we are.
And I think that is so important because we live in a society of YOLO, and we live in a society of doing me. And so when you live that way, you don't worry about for whose you are. And so sometimes you don't do the work for those people that you belong to. So we're going to go to break, and then when we come back, we're going to dive into how do you do the work that can impact and help for whose you are.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to learn the difference between sedimentary and metamorphic rock. Go find those rocks. Dare to keep daring. Dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
welcome back. And again, today we have our residents, our activists in residence. That's almost a tongue tie. So, one, I needed to ask you, how did you even accept that offer to be PV's AMU activist in residence?
Well, I just think it's just a really beautiful thing that you have an activist in residence, that you see it as important to instill in your students the what I call sacred duty, to stand up when you see injustice, and to move forward a vision of a free and liberated world and society. So the activist in residence position was presented to me by my friend, my colleague. I always say I'm the third Price triplet because she's Melanie Price. She has a sister, Melinda Price.
Okay.
And I'm Melina.
Right.
It sounds good. Melanie, Melinda,
Right.
Melina. We all came through graduate school in political science around the same time, and have known each other since we were just young pups.
Yes. That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, so Dr. Price reached out and talked about this activist in residence position. Prairie View is my grandmother's alma mater. So everything just seemed like divinely ordered, and really a beautiful place to really integrate intellectualism and movement on the ground. So I'm very grateful and honored to be the inaugural activist in residence here at Prairie View.
And we were so blessed to have you. The students really learned a lot from you. And when you talk about intellectualism, one of the things that I think about is Brown versus the Board of Education. Our fight to have equal education in the Black community was a long fight. And when you think about the historical impact and where we are now as far as education, I'm curious to think about what you all think as faculty and what you think as faculty and an activist, because you serve double duty. How do you think that outcome of the case really helped or hindered our community? Do you think, what do you think the impact was?
Isn't this a short show?
It is. So give me like the bullet points, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a few bullet points.
Okay.
Right? So, of course, we want to topple barriers. We want to topple segregation. And really, Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 was meant to topple segregation, right? But I think that we need to think about the difference between desegregation and full-fledged integration, right? Especially when it means abandoning the things that we built for Black community. We do need, and we talked about this in the our faculty conversation, spaces of Black autonomy. And so desegregation and the ability to come into spaces that previously tried to keep us out, right, is really important, and we have to balance that with also nurturing and growing and holding on to and maintaining spaces of Black autonomy.
Yes, very true. I think we do. I don't think the case was to get rid of our spaces, but we wanted equality in our spaces.
Right. I mean, Thurgood Marshall said separate but equal is inherently unequal, right? Because if you live in a society grounded in white supremacy, which America is, right, then the white folks who hold the bulk of the power are going to say the part that they hold on to is going to have the new textbooks and the new school buildings, and we get whatever crumbs are left over. So separate but equal is inherently unequal. So we want a right to get into the public spaces, and we also need our own stuff as Black people.
Exactly. Which brings me to you, Dr. Price. Having our stuff as our own community with the center, how do you think, or what do you view the case about, or the impact of the case?
You know, when I think about Brown, one of the things I think more than anything is we only had maybe one generation to ever actually truly benefit from Brown, right? Almost as soon as school integration started to happen, the effort to desegregate schools again, the effort to segregate schools again was put in place. And so maybe from in the 1980s, we had some form of racial integration efforts, but really before and after that, we have had only those people who have pushed ideas like neighborhood schools only in an effort for their children to remain in unequally funded schools. That is, so that certain neighborhoods can get more from the school district than others.
Yeah.
But I also think about the impact of it on rural communities.
Okay.
My mom is from a town here in Texas called Eagle Lake, Texas, and they had a storied history of a school called E.H. Henry, but at integration, they completely shut that school down because the town never really could afford more than one school.
Okay.
And so then the order to desegregate them forces them to close these schools they couldn't afford anyway. And so when they closed those schools, they also closed down traditions, and they closed down opportunities, and they closed down employment for certain people. And so now that school closed in 1970, actually, and now they have their school reunions, and you have to remember their last graduated in 1970.
Wow.
Right? And so the history of them is also dying out.
Right.
With the people. And I think about those kinds of things that were not the dreams of the people who wanted equal school funding, who wanted integration. They wanted integration because they wanted their children to have equal access to the place where opportunities were.
Correct.
And today it remains that the best indicator of the kind of education your child will get is how many white children are in the classroom.
That's right. Dr. Block.
I ditto what everyone has stated, and I also think that with the Brown versus Brown, with the Board of Education in terms of that, the only thing that we needed was the same books that you sent to their school. And integration, although it was good in some places, but sometimes it did not work for our benefit, because when you shut down history and the school is used as a storeroom,
Right.
and you shut down that type of connection, and then you bus people from X, Y to X, Z, or wherever they have to go. It's a sort of demeaning in the minds of an individual, because you begin to think, and it could become something that you believe, that what you had was not of any benefit.
Right.
It was not up to standard. It was not good. And it goes back to that inequality piece, that if you would just give us the same
Yes.
advantages that you have or had, we would have the same footing as long as we're given that opportunity. And it goes back into the slavery days. And my dad used to always say this, that our problem is that we could not read.
You're right.
And they did not want us to read.
Right.
So we did not have what we needed to start reading. They would not provide us the books.
Right.
Goes the same thing with the integration that we were trying to do. And as of today, I know that we have made progress, but when you look at where just America is today with the African American, I have to go back and ask myself just how did the integration scene really help us?
Right.
And it could be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, because history, they say that if you don't know your history,
You repeat yourself.
and this goes back to them trying to erase us as history now, thinking that if you tell the real story,
Right.
what impact is it going to have on others that are not, and I'll say of the African American culture or of a minority culture. That piece has to always be something that should not be forgotten.
Right.
And the integration piece has its benefits, but it also had that negative overtone, because all we wanted, and it starts with what you and Dr. Molina said, was equality.
Yeah.
Didn't have to be that you just necessarily separated us
Right.
from everything, but make it equal.
Exactly.
First thing I said, if you have the 8th edition, don't send me or give me the 6th edition.
Right.
Something that was a throwaway.
Right.
Give me the same edition that you have.
Right.
Right.
And let me take the knowledge, and you'll see what I can do, which will be the same thing that you get when you read the book.
Thank you.
So it has to be equal.
Exactly. And the reason why I chose this is because I believe that education is a foundation for most achievement in America. Going back to what you said, not being able to read did hold us back from a lot of opportunities. So in order to gain from education, it has to be equal in some way. We already discussed all the problems that we've seen in education as an impact from Brown versus Board of Education. But now that you know, and you know how to engage with it, you know the rich research about it, how do you work to change that? So that's where you come in today, is saying, so now how do you begin the work? How do you begin the work to change some of the things that we see wrong in education?
That's a big question. I think that we have to vision an educational system that's really liberatory, right? That really nurtures the creativity and brilliance and souls of our children, right? That allows them to step into the fullness of their being and of their potential.
Yes.
I think that too often now school systems, and you know, in some way this is the intention of school systems, are meant to get our young people to conform to a system that was never meant for their benefit, right? So how do we build systems that, again, nurture their creativity and their brilliance? I think that we invest in, you know, one of my mentors, Dr. Julianne Malveaux, always says that budgets are statements, they're moral and ethical documents, and they're statements of our values, right? So when you talk about school systems that spend massive amounts of resources on school police and don't have nurses on campus, don't have counselors on campus, don't have librarians on campus, then schools become places where you're actually policing our children, putting them on what they call a school to prison pipeline, rather than helping them become the artists and teachers and doctors and engineers that they could become. You are tracking them for a criminal system of injustice. And I think that this is where we get to this question of the relationship between equality and equity, right? Really what we're looking for in our schools is equity, is fundamental fairness, where we're building schools, especially for Black children, that serve them, that don't police them, that allow them to be free and creative beings.
Yes, thank you. I totally agree with you, and I agree with you on the fact that once we've had the discussion, there are some ways that we have to start looking at maybe something different. Mom's Mabley, one of the quotes that she had that I love to death is that if you continue to do something the same way, you will always continue to get the same outcome. So we have to start looking at something different. We're going to go to commercial break, and then I have a question for Dr. Price and Dr. Block. Thank you.
What do an aerospace engineer, cancer immunologist, and bat scientist all have in common? We all have cool jobs in STEM fields. Whether it's building robots or learning to code, girls everywhere are finding their passion for science, technology, engineering, and math through positive role models and mentors. So dare to dive in, get connected, and explore. You never know what your future may hold. Learn more about these and even more cool jobs at SheCanSTEM.com.
welcome back. And now I want to talk to Dr. Price and Dr. Block, because here at PV, we have the luxury of having a race center, but we also have the luxury of having a president that encourages our students to get involved and be active. So as faculty here, how do you encourage students in your classrooms to be involved and be active in your prospective classes? Because you have to teach different contents. You're STEM, you're political science, so how do you do that?
Well, political science is easy, right? Because basically you walk in the door saying, do you know who your congressperson is? Do you know who is the mayor of the place where you live? Like, you ask these sort of basic questions immediately that's require them to do more research about themselves.
Right.
That is at the most basic level. Who are the people who claim to represent you? But more than anything, for me, I'm very interested in creating critical thinkers, creating people who challenge and ask questions.
Right.
I mean, the hard part is they then challenge you and ask questions of you. But if you're doing it right, then you're proud in that moment, right? You're proud when they assert themselves. But our goal is to really tell kids not to take anything at face value. None of it. And so that can be tricky.
Yes.
For them, because then they have to start questioning things that they learned at home that they weren't allowed to question. They have to start questioning things that people they trust on this campus tell them. But my goal is to tell them to question everything.
That's good. I like that. Ms. Fly.
And
Dr.
one thing
Block.
that happens with the STEM area, since that's what I'm in, and specifically the department that I serve, we make sure that our students understand, number one, there is a recipe for success.
Okay.
And a part of that recipe is having knowledge as to what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And one of the main things that you have to do is read.
Yes.
And if you're not reading, and I always say to my students that reading does not mean that you are enunciating, pronouncing the words correctly. It means that you actually know what you're reading.
Right.
And when you come across something that you don't know, common sense should tell you, let me look it up and see what it is. Because in the STEM discipline, it goes back to that inequality. And it's so prevalent now because you have all of these programs that talk about making STEM as diverse as possible. Well, one of the problems with that is if it does not start at, I would say, kindergarten, elementary, where you are letting a person who would be classified as a minority or underserved understand and realize that this is something that they can do, but instead you demean the person that they are and make them think that they cannot think, then you have already hurt the problem more than anything.
Right.
Because it gets embedded into the mind of an individual.
And that gets into stereotype threat. They have that embedded theory that, oh, if I fail, I represent and I fail my whole culture. Then that's everybody. So that's a lot of weight to carry on.
So I like to be clear that it's not just stereotype threat, right? It's actual threat, right?
Okay.
It's not, stereotype implies that you believe as a person that someone is stereotyping you.
But no, then you're saying no.
But
it's
these
threat,
people
threat.
are actually stereotyping them, who are actually holding biased opinions about who can do math and who can do science and who can do higher order thinking.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's that threat that's also important too.
And it's beyond threat.
Right.
Because it's actually implemented. It's not it's not just threat. It's
exactly.
As you were speaking, and I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I'm a mother too, right? And I have a 15-year-old daughter. She's just discovered physics. And we were talking about time travel. I said, if you study physics, you could actually be a researcher who does time travel study.
Right.
And she got excited and she said, but Mama, I don't know math. And I had to say to her, because I remember she used to love math in elementary school, but somehow she lost math. And I don't know math because I lost math in junior high school too. But I had to say to her, Amara, you're 15 years old. Even if you had to go all the way back to the beginning, it's only a few years back.
Right.
We can relearn math.
Right.
So what I'm saying is it's not just threat. It's that the systems were created to deny my daughter math, to deny me math, you math, because political scientists, we pretend we do math, we don't really do math, right? Or I don't, right?
I I'd like to point out that I know 5 black PhDs in physics who have graduated from this very institution.
Okay.
That's a plug for you and Amara.
That's right. But it's not just a threat. It's
Yeah.
that they have constructed systems
Right, to keep them out of it.
that suppress that math, that science genius in little black girls like my daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And you know, that leads to what a lot of people are talking about now, which is the imposter
Syndrome.
Right.
because of you putting in the minds of someone, maybe you're not good enough.
Right.
Right.
And then you start that doubting. And, you know, a lot of times, even with that male, that
Yeah.
little black boy, when you look at him and you demean him right from the beginning,
Right.
it's a system where maybe you know what you're doing, but it's so unfortunate that once that heartbeat is a piece of it has been taken away, it is so hard to get it to come back.
It is.
And you realize, I really can't do this.
Yes.
Which it all goes back to, we need a recipe for success.
Right.
Yes.
And we just need to let our students know, these are the things that you need to do. And it starts very early.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
once you let it die down, it's so hard to pick it back up on
That's
the
right.
inside of an individual. Because you, just like you said with your daughter, she has in her mind now that she can't handle math.
Right.
Well, that's probably, it could have been an incident that might have happened where she was trying to do a problem and somebody said, oh, that's too hard for you. Maybe she kept hearing it, and then it gets in the mindset, and
Right.
you just develop that attitude, well, maybe this is not for me. Let me just leave it alone.
Yeah.
But if we keep plugging away and making sure that our children have the same advantages, because you have to look at the school systems. A lot of them don't have us of the STEM color in there working with the students, so they don't see them. And sometimes they might not see them until they get into junior high.
Yes.
That's all they've seen, not a person that looks like us. So that makes them wonder right away, well, where are my people? Are we capable of doing this?
Yeah.
And I just had a parent that visited me yesterday, and one of the things I said to them was, nobody understands us any better than us.
Ooh, now see,
So-
that's a word.
Nobody understands us any better than us.
And with that, Dr. Block, I'm gonna close out, but I want to close out on that note. Nobody understands us better than us. We need each other to do this work. I've heard you so many times say that we have to work in numbers. To work alone, you can work alone, but what will you really truly accomplish by yourself, what we can accomplish together? There's so many things that we have to accomplish. We can't afford to be on an island working by ourselves.
Right.
We need to work together. We need to partnership. We need to find those alliances that we can do to tackle our problems, because they are of many. But so my challenge to you is, one, is to find out and remember of whose you are, but also to find out what your activism is. I always say that there's not one form of activism, and I truly believe that. So I want you to continue to find your purpose and continue to tune in here so I can maybe find guests that can give you nuggets to do that. Next week, we will have the graduate students of PVAMU on the show. And at 4 o'clock today, I'm going to have Tiffany Thomas, our assistant professor in our community development college, but also she's the council person of District F. So I'm can't wait to hear what she has to share later on today. So tune in at 4, but also tune in on April 22nd to my podcast. Dr. Billy Hawkins from University of Houston will be on to talk about critical race theory and sports, and how we have gone from the plantation to the sports field. So I'm really excited to hear his thoughts and his research. But thank you for tuning in to this special episode of D.O.P.E Conversations. We ask you to click on PVAMU TV and follow, and click on Paquita Pegram and follow. And please follow these beautiful ladies. They got so much to share. Have a great day, and Paquita out.